In this video, we'll explore how to create a running total chart in Power BI by utilizing DAX quick measures and creating a calendar table to support the visualization. As a quick recap, we've completed the matrix table in our previous video. So in this video, we're going to shift our focus to the data visualizations portion of the report requirements. Now to start with, we're going to create a running total chart to fulfill the requirements for this net profit historical running total item. The end result of this video will be a completed chart that will look very similar to this, giving us the ability to see historical growth across a date range for net profits. Alright, let's get started. So as I've already mentioned, the thing that we want to create in this video is a running total chart, and we can use the quick measures tool to do that. So let me quickly show you the quick measures tool again, where this calculation is, and let's discuss it a bit. So we're going to come up here to the upper right hand corner and right click on the DAX measures table and select new quick measure. And I'm going to come up here for my calculation section, and I'm going to move down to the running total down here under the totals section. Now you notice it has two values in here where I can drag data fields. We have our base value, which will be what we're calculating, so that will eventually be the net profit that we add to here. But secondly, we have something below it called field. Now if I hover over the information button in here, you'll see that it says the running field in which to calculate the total, resetting each time this field repeats. So translated, what that's saying is a date field. Now it's important to pause here and talk about the need to have a calendar table for this. So let me go ahead and close this window and let's discuss that a bit before we create this calculation. So similar to our other lookup tables in our data model, the primary reasons we want a separate calendar table is because we want to keep that lookup information off of our data table. Our data tables have many rows. Just coming back to our relationship view for a second, our sales table or data table has a lot of rows on it. That has 60,000, 100,000, any number that's really high is what our data table will typically contain. And we want to avoid putting too many text or lookup columns on there. So just like we have a store table or a products master table, we would also then want to now add a calendar table to our data model. That way it can contain any number of calendar columns or any other calculations that we want in terms of lookup values against any kind of date, either calendar or fiscal. So that's what we want to create. And we can actually utilize DAX to do this. DAX can help us create a calendar table that will anchor to our sales data, that will be able to grab the start date for sales and the end date for sales from our sales table, and then create a calendar table for exactly that range. So I'm going to come back to my report view. I'm going to go up to modeling, and I'm going to select new table, which will add a new table from a DAX expression. And I'm going to call this calendar. That will be equal to the calendar function, which will return a table with one column of all dates between start date and end date. So that also means too, is if our sales table has any gaps in their dates, meaning there was a day where we didn't have an actual date for that individual day or date, then this would still return those rows because it returns continuous dates. Unlike sales, which could have been closed for a day or any number of reasons that could have led us to not had any recorded data for that specific date. And that's really good for time intelligence functions because they work best when your date range that you're providing them for any DAX functions that looks at a date field, like our running total as an example, is really good to have continuous dates like this will be providing. Go ahead and fill that function in. And my start date is going to be the first sales day. So that's going to be min, which will return the earliest or smallest value of my date. Scrolling down a little bit to getting my sales date. There we are. And then my end date for my calendar table will also be the max of my date. Perfect. Close the parentheses on the max and then close it again for calendar, hit enter. And if we take a look over on our fields list on the right, we'll see that the calendar table is now in here. And like with any other disconnected table, once we've added this, we want to create a relationship for it. So I'll come over to my relationship view. And then there's my calendar table up here. And I'm going to go ahead and drag the date here into the date on my calendar table to create that relationship. Perfect. Now another thing we can consider too, if we come back to the report view, take a look at my sales table, I have the date connected to an external lookup table now, so I can hide that column. And the same thing with my sales table is now that most of the data that I have is all in my lookup tables and I've already created my DAX measures, I don't even need to show my sales table anymore. So I could actually hide the entire table. So I'm going to right click that and select hide as well. Perfect. Now I can go ahead and create that running total chart. So I'm going to come up to DAX measures. I'm going to select new quick measure again. And the calculation that I want to create is running total. And my base value will be my net profit. And now for my calendar table, there is the date. Now if you'll notice too, on here or over in my fields list, the little icon for the table itself is shaded a slightly blue color. And that's different from the normal ones, and that's just to indicate to you that this table was created with a DAX measure. DAX can be able to create single value calculations like we've been doing with our measures, but they can also create any number of calculated tables leveraging your data to create some kind of new table that can be used in your data model. All right, and directions is ascending, everything else is good. Go ahead and select OK. Beautiful. And we take a look in our upper left-hand corner, we can see that it has created net profit running total in date with a calculation in here, and all of that's working. Let's go ahead and rename it just a little bit to clean it up. I'm just going to call it net profit running total. There we are. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drag and drop this onto a new visualization right over here. Let's resize that a little bit. And that's going to create that single value for now, but what I also want here is to show something on the axis. So I'm going to add that date from calendar onto the axis. Now important when you watch this, I have one single column in my calendar table. I haven't added anything else. See what happens when I add it to the axis. Do you notice that it created 4 fields in there? I added just the date, which is simply at the day level, but it also brought in year, quarter, month, and day. This is an auto-generated calendar table that is created in the back end of the data model by Power BI whenever a field is a date data type. So it's a great thing with the calendars. I don't have to go and add extra columns myself. It automatically did this for me. Even better, that chart here at the top, similar to the table with the hierarchy, I now have the option to be able to expand down or expand up and see the data that way. So for this exercise, I've discussed with the client, and I think the best view for this is going to be at the quarter level. So I'm going to use that expand down button in that hierarchy up here at the top. Go ahead and expand that out. And now we can see that we have the year plus quarter showing. And there's that really nice running total that we've already seen earlier that kind of slowly builds up with this. Now there's a couple of other things we can do to really make this chart stand out and be a lot more visually pleasing or aesthetically pleasing, as it were. So I'm going to do a couple things to kind of clean this up to finish this off. So that net profit running total, I'm also going to add this to the color saturation here, and you'll see what this does in a second. What this has now done is it's created 2 tones with my data. Smaller numbers are one color, and as it gets bigger or larger, it changes to a different color. Now currently it's going from red to green, which I don't really want to do. That indicates bad to good. And I just want it to go from a lighter green to a darker green as the color grows, to further draw the eyes to the fact that the larger numbers are more important. So I'm going to come over to that format painter. I'm going to go to data colors, and I'm going to change minimum from that red color to a light green, and then the maximum, I'm even going to make it darker green. There we are. I think that looks a lot better now, but it really just helps to flow with the data and draw the eyes to the important values. Now, 2 other things that I want to do on this to wrap it up. I'm going to go ahead and also turn on the title. It does something down here when you turn this on. Its default is to show the title left aligned and a light gray color, which I think is somewhat noticeable, but it has room for improvement. So I'm going to shorten the name a little bit. I'm going to call this net profit running total by date hierarchy. And I use the word hierarchy up here just to indicate that they have the option to use the hierarchy controls. So it just helps the client or the user understand that those are available. And then one thing I like to do is I like to add a bit of background color to this to help frame the object. So I'm going to go ahead and change this from clear to maybe a dark blue, and then change that font color to a white to be able to make it stand out. And I'll usually kick the text size up to about 11. There we go, and you can see over here it's now created a nice border around the visualization. Okay, the very last thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to come back to that paint roller over here again, and I'm going to go ahead and turn on data labels. Now the data labels are nice because it shows it immediately just by looking at the chart what the actual numbers are without having to try to guesstimate that based off of the y-axis. Now if you needed to get the exact number, if you do hover over any of the columns in the chart, you will get the total value. One added benefit to this is you can add additional fields into this tooltip here, which is what they're called if you wanted to. So let's say I have the running total for 2009 quarter 4, but I also wanted to see what was the actual net profit just for that quarter. So I'm going to come back to the fields list, and there's this tooltips section down here that I want to drag data fields into. So I'm going to come over, and I'm going to take net profit, and I'm going to add that into my tooltips. One more time. There we are. And now let's take a look. It's now showing up in that pop-up. It doesn't show anywhere on the chart itself, but when the tooltip pop-up shows, then it becomes available. All right, so that about covers it for this video. In our next video, we're going to explore how to create a column and line combo chart and also create some more DAX calculations to finally address that year-over-year calculation requirement that is part of our report requirements list. So I will see you then.